Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, gang, where I'm back in the UK after an amazing event in Armenia. And, of course, achieving my second Gary Vaynerchuk interview of the year. And a few people have emailed me to say, it must have been great meeting Gary, but was he cocky? Was he arrogant? Let me tell you, nothing like that at all. He's a people person. And I watched from the sidelines for a short space of time, and I watched hundreds and hundreds of people fighting for a selfie. And for me, that would have been a complete nightmare. But he made time for each and every single person that he encountered and gave them his time and a cheeky smile and a few words of wisdom as well. A complete gentleman throughout. And it was also nice to thank the man again that inspired me to follow my path. And before I was doing this, I was supporting and helping HR teams with clunky IT software, applications and upgrades, which is one of the reasons why I'm quite excited to get today's guest on the show. And while conducting workplace investigations at high-profile companies such as Honeywell, Citibank, and a few others, Deb Muller realised that there was no standardised or formal training for HR professionals working inside investigations, which essentially puts organisations at risk for potential lawsuits. So to solve this issue, she founded the tech platform HR Acuity to help companies identify, track and investigate employee issues. Fast forward a few years, and that platform that she's created is now being used by companies such as Lyft and LinkedIn and so many more. It's a great story, but I don't want to reveal too much now. So come with me on a trip to New Jersey, where Deb Muller is waiting to speak with us now and share her story. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Deb Muller, and I'm the CEO and founder of HR Acuity. HR Acuity is the only technology platform that was specifically developed to manage employee relations and investigations.
And before we dive in and talk about HR Acuity, if I may, I'd love to take you back in time to where I believe you were conducting workplace investigations at high-profile companies and then found yourself realising that there was no standardised or formal training for HR professionals, especially working in investigations, which ultimately put organisations at risk for potential lawsuits. So can you share that story and that aha moment that followed?
Yeah, so you're right. I spent many years in HR as a HR professional, HR leader, and for some reason found myself conducting a lot of investigations. And when you conduct investigations, you get better at them. And when you get better at them, people start giving you more of them. And then you get the more complex ones and things like that. So when I decided to leave kind of corporate life and go out on my own, HR Acuity was actually originally set up to conduct third-party workplace investigations. That was my vision at the time. There was no tech that was part of that business plan. So I started out talking to clients and prospective clients about our process that we were going to use to conduct investigations. I kind of put together this, at the time, 5-step process. And they started asking me, well, we want your process for the investigations that you're not going to do. We need a better way to do this. And at first I kind of said, well, no, you have to use HR Acuity for that. That's our service. And then I started realizing that there were so many investigations that were being done in-house anyways. Our firm was really looking to do the more high-profile investigations, the more complex ones. But I realized that investigations were going on all the time, and I knew from my own experience that there was no consistency on how they were done. There was pretty much a lack of training. I mean, I learned how to do investigations originally by buying a book on how to do investigations. I did get better at it later. So the capabilities of the HR professionals were kind of all over the place. Everything was manual. There was no way to kind of keep historical information or knowledge. There was just this huge gap in data. And it was really the last bastion of HR manual processes. And that was when I thought, you know what, I think I can do something here. Not really knowing what that meant, but I knew there was an opportunity.
And you really did just that. And to solve those challenges that you encountered, You then founded the tech platform HR Acuity to help companies identify, track, and investigate those employee issues. So can you share the journey from experiencing a problem to then creating a solution and going out there and solving it? I mean, where do you start to tackle something like this?
Yeah, where do you start that? So it's funny because my clients would say to me, we need a better way to do this. We need a better way. And I started saying things to them like, well, we're thinking of licensing our process. And I knew what that meant, but I didn't know what that meant in context of what I was offering. Yeah. And it was way back when actually I was talking to AOL and they were transforming their HR processes. And I said to them, we're thinking of licensing. And I went home and I said, well, what am I going to license to AOL? I have like paper tools, I kind of have everything in a word suite, Excel and paper. And I said, they're AOL, they don't use paper. I have to webify this or digitize it. So I had no technology background at all. And I did the only thing that I really knew to do from a technology standpoint was PowerPoint. So I guess throughout my career, I didn't have a lot of good assistants helping me, so I learned PowerPoint quite well, and I started drawing the system out on PowerPoint, and I drew a login screen, and I knew that if I logged in somewhere, I typically went to a home page. I was really using all of my experience as a user to create these pages, which 50 screens later would really become the prototype for the software that we had. And all I knew was that I had been the user of really bad HR technology that was clearly not built by anyone that knew anything about HR. It was built by engineers who just didn't have a clue. And so my commitment was that I was going to do things differently. So here I had this 50-page PowerPoint document. I got together, friends, HR leaders who were friends, lawyers who I'd worked with. I invited them to my house. We were all at my dining room table. I got a big platter of sushi. I used my son at the time I think it was called a Zoom box or something where you could, project on the wall. And I showed them my PowerPoint. And they said, hey, that's really good. We've never seen anything like that. We think it's great. And I got to tell you, Neil, that was my research. I mean, maybe a little bit more, but it wasn't a whole lot more than that. And I said to my husband, look, honey, I'm going to pivot the business a little bit. I'll keep doing investigations, kind of pays the bills. It's going to help fund this. I have a little money that's coming due from some deferred comp. And it's really not going to take a long time. Maybe 6 months, this thing's going to be up and running. It's going to be a great success. So I learned a lot. I learned that technology takes a lot more money than you expect. I learned it takes a lot longer than you expect. And I also tell people I learned that I have a very supportive husband. He was just like, okay, do what you need to do. And to this day, the same thing. So it was a real learning process, but I'm glad that I did it that way. When I talk to other entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs and they want some advice from me, I always tell them that story because I know if I had gone and done all the homework that I probably should have done, well, what does it take to stand up an enterprise software system? What do you need for infrastructure? If I had gone and tried to figure all that out or learn all that stuff, I would have realized how much I didn't know. And I probably would have turned around and run very quickly the other way.
And I'm so glad you raised just how bad many HR tech solutions are out there, because in a former life, I was the IT guy and I heavily supported a HR department there. And I've sat in meetings with various pitches for HR software solutions. And it seemed to me that almost every single one was just incredibly clunky and almost designed by engineers for engineers and certainly not for HR departments. Is that something that you encountered as well?
Absolutely. And even just the littlest things. There's a couple examples I give. When you have an employee issue, there might be a couple of different times when you have to go and document what's been happening. So we've had people say, well, when you document a new entry, where does it go in the system? And I say, well, of course it goes to the bottom because you want to read the story sequentially to know what's happening. And they'll be like, oh, no, the engineers, they put it at the top, right? They put the last entry first. But that doesn't make any sense. So, we really, when people use our software, when they see our software and our technology, they understand that someone who knew their job had a hand in creating it.
And what I love about your story here is you had no tech background at all and just armed with this desire to create a solution. And just to tell everyone listening and make them understand just how inspirational your story has been, HR Acuity is now being used by companies such as Lyft, LinkedIn, and so many others. So from starting your own business, solving real problems, how difficult was it to get big clients like that on board?
It's an interesting question. I don't know how difficult it was. I mean, I didn't really focus on the big names of the companies that I wanted. I really focused on the relationships. I mean, I knew there were people out there working in those large companies. I mean, I had worked in large companies like that, and I knew they had a problem. And I knew that me and my team, we could understand those challenges and that pain more than anybody else. And that's really how we developed those relationships and ultimately formed those partnerships with companies like that by really kind of, being a partner and understanding and listening to them and saying, we think that we can solve that problem. And then they trusted us. They trusted us and we delivered. We continue to really hold transparency as one of our values. That's really important to us. It's who we are. It's what we're trying to do. And I really appreciate those companies that early on. I mean, now it's getting easier. We're larger. We have great referenceable clients, but there were a few early on that, quite frankly, whether they knew it or not, they were taking a bet on me. And at the time, it was me. Now it's us. There's a lot of us now, but they were taking a bet, and I really appreciate that. I mean, there were companies, and I can remember one in particular that I will not name, that loved our solution, and their IT department basically said, we only do business with publicly traded companies. No. And this was not that long ago. And I thought, wow, that is short-sighted if you want to bring innovation into your company.
Absolutely. That's shocking, isn't it?
I will, yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, man. But, I mean, you are working with some of the biggest brands in the world now. I'm curious, are you finding that they're all facing the same challenges no matter what size they are? And if they are, I mean, how are you helping them overcome such challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, everybody has employees. And if you have employees, they're not always going to do what you want them to do. Whether it's, a small indiscretion or much larger, you can pretty much guarantee that if you have employees, you're going to have issues. And for us, that was sort of a benefit and a curse, right? Because everybody needed us. So as we started out as a company, we kind of were boiling the ocean. Who were we going to help? Where were we going to help them? Where was our sweet spot with our limited resources? Really figuring out, who we were best suited to serve, because everybody really is facing the same issue. But they also want similar things. They want an easy-to-use solution, something that people are going to use. Technology is great, but if it gathers dust and people don't use it, or if they use it inconsistently, so garbage in, garbage out, that's a problem. It has to be able to integrate with their existing systems. So all of those things really relate to the challenges that our customers have. The other way that we help them overcome is really staying in touch with them. So knowing our customers. One of the things that I started early on was building this employee relations community. It started with a very simple survey that I did way back when. Someone asked me some questions about the kind of the market, and I got some questions. I sent it out, I think, to my 40 contacts I had. This was a while ago. And I got 28 responses, and I published that. And that was our first employee relations survey. And then I kept doing it over and over, and we'd get a couple hundred participants and things like that. And then a few years ago, we really formalized it and launched our employee relations benchmark study, which now covers over 4.5 million employees, and really talks about what organizations are doing. So that, coupled with a roundtable group that we have of senior employee relations leaders that come together on an annual basis and then talk throughout the year, we are so in touch with what the challenges are of employee relations leaders. And that's how we understand what they're going through. That's how we think about our solution and how to enhance our product. And without that, I don't think I know our product would not be as successful, because when we launch something, when we enhance something, we know there's a need, and we have people that we're talking to constantly about it.
And of course, there's no denying that we are living in a digital age now. But how do you think, and how are you finding that technology is improving that workplace investigation process that we've talked about?
Well, there's a couple things. The first thing is that if it's used properly, it is bringing transparency to the process. So Me Too has certainly been a catalyst for our growth. I cannot deny that. It's really helped organizations at a more senior level start asking the question about what's going on, what the risk is. And one of the things we heard from Me Too loud and clear was that people don't feel comfortable coming forward when there was an issue. There was an EEOC stat that said between 25 to 75% of people have an issue and they don't report it. We actually are just about to release our own survey, which said about the same thing. About 35% of people have issues and they don't come forward. And they don't come forward not because they don't know why or don't know how. They don't come forward because they don't know what to expect or they're worried about the repercussions of that. And so in order to get past that, you have to show that there's a process. And when you have a process in place, and you use technology to reinforce that process so it's consistent, people are going to be much more accepting of the outcome. And we know that from other things that we do. So, for example, I think about other HR processes like a posting process, right? People feel like if they're given an opportunity to post for a job internally and interview for it, they're more accepting of the outcome if they don't get the job. So similarly, if people feel like there was a process and they were investigated, there was an investigation when they raised an issue, that they were given the opportunity to speak, that there was people that were talked to, there was documents reviewed, they might not totally love the outcome, but they're going to be much more accepting of it. And that transparency can be done much easier with technology. So a couple ways, we're even seeing that in some organizations. Microsoft and Google, for example, announced this spring that they are starting to publish stats on investigations, particularly those related to harassment in the workplace. So the stats are, we had X number of issues this quarter, this many were substantiated, this many were not substantiated. So what does that say to your employees? Number one, there has to be a process because they're counting. So they have to know what's going on. And number two, they're counting, which means they care. And number three, that data is going to be very telling because if you come out with, 65% of the issues were substantiated, 35% weren't, it sends a message that not only is there a process and they're doing something about it, but sometimes they believe people. Maybe the majority of times they believe people, whatever the data shows. You can't do that without technology. You also need technology for historical reasons. There's a lot of attrition in organizations. If people are just kind of writing their notes, and this is what HR folks typically do in the past, is they write everything in a spiral notebook. There's no history. So if we look back a few years, if we think about Matt Lauer, for example, at NBC, he didn't walk in one day and just start harassing someone. There were little things happening along the way that were ignored or documented, and we can use Matt Lauer as an adjective. Anybody, the people aren't putting the pieces together to say we have a problem in our organization. So ideally, with technology, yes, we're still going to have issues that rise to the surface. We're not going to get rid of everything. But organizations and employee relations leaders and HR leaders and business leaders can be much more proactive to see the signs and to start to look at history and start to even predict where there's more risk and where there are areas where employees may not be as safe as they should be at work and therefore not producing the best that they can.
And if we do have any business leaders listening or HR professionals, could you possibly offer a use case that will help them visualize exactly how it works and how your solution could work in their world too?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our system, we like to think about the workflow in this paradigm of a traffic light. So a green light is everything you do in your organization to set up the expectations of how you want your employees to behave. So you have your policies and your guidelines, your job descriptions, your goals, and your objectives for the employee. But you know that through the course of any employee's life cycle, they're not going to hit everything perfectly. Otherwise, there'd be we wouldn't need a lot of HR people. I wouldn't have a lot of work here. But there's deviations from the norm. So what we do in our system is we have what we call our employee relations issues. These are the kind of once and done, fast and frequent issues that your leaders, both your managers and your HR folks, are going to be documenting on a regular basis. So it could be a performance issue or a policy violation, a leave issue. So those are really important because you can start to see trends and patterns. We had a client at one point who saw that they were having a lot of turnover in a particular area in their organization. And when they dug into the data, they could see that the people were leaving were having performance issues more so than the others that weren't leaving. And then they dug in a little bit deeper and they saw that the performance issues were around one particular aspect of their job. So they were able to deploy specific training for that piece of the job that ultimately reduced turnover. That's data that they wouldn't have had otherwise. Or if you see a particular area of the business where you see a spike in employee relations issues, again, not necessarily investigations, but little issues that are going on, and that's unusual. It could be a sign that there's some union activity brewing that you want to get ahead of. It could also be a sign of some leadership issues that you might be having. So really important data to know what's going on in your organizations, or at least know what questions to ask. When you're an HR leader, going to your business leader and saying, something's going on here, something's different than before, or looking at events and being able to predict, why did we have a spike in activity after our holiday party? Let's dig in and see if we can actually make that go down next year because it's creating an environment that's not good for our employees. So that's the kind of the yellow light, we call them issues. And then the red light are when you have an investigation. So obviously, if someone comes forward, something's not going right in the organization, they feel like they're not being treated properly, that's when you need a specific process like we talked about before to really make sure it's done in a compliant and a trusting manner so that you get to the outcome. And you can nip it in the bud, you can remediate it, you can take care of the individuals that are involved so people can go on and have the best possible experience at work. Those are kind of the workflows that you go through, but the data is so important underneath that. So one of the things that we provide also is the ability to benchmark against your peer companies to see how many issues you have. So let's say our company has 30 investigations on sexual harassment in a year. Is that good? Is that bad? Kind of normalizing it. It also allows you to look across the organization to make sure you're managing similar issues consistently so that they're not creating any type of disparate impact situation. I want to make sure that we're dealing with all of our time and attendance issues consistently, and then we're not handling them with one protected group, like with females, in a way other than we would with our male employees.
And we've both seen clunky HR systems over the years, and many people working in HR often dread new systems coming in because of that huge tech learning curve that typically comes with it. So I've got to ask, what kind of feedback have you received from your clients? And also, how easy is it for businesses to get to grips with your technology from when it enters the building?
So I have to say that our clients are our biggest fans. We just signed a contract with an employee. I call her our three-peat. She was a user at one company. She left there to go lead an organization, brought it in there. And then a few years later, she left to leave and she joined a new organization and just brought HR Acuity in again. So I just love that. She's our three-peat, and I just hope she keeps moving on and changing jobs. But I think part of it is how, again, back to kind of that HR headset that we have on, we know our users, they have to learn how to embrace it so it becomes part of their day. We don't want this to be duplicative. We don't want them writing something on paper and then having to enter it in the system. That is not the experience that we want. We need each stakeholder in the organization to love it, from those that are using it day to day, but also the decision makers and the leaders who need to get an alert when something is amiss, or they just need to get data. So that's really what our job is, keeping our mindset on that. And again, one of the reasons we, I think, are successful at it is we talk to our users. We ask them what they need. We listen to them. Sometimes they think they need one thing, but we know through tech we can actually even do it better. So we try to continually delight them and make it part of their work that they do.
Now, one of the trends I'm seeing in this space more and more at the moment is employee experience, especially as the experience economy gathers pace, and we're taking those experiences that we have at home and those expectations and expecting them in the workplace too. But are there any HR tech trends that particularly excite you at the moment?
That's a great one. I do believe the employee experience is really important. As a matter of fact, we just implemented an eNPS score into our system. So after a case, after an investigation, you can actually go get feedback from your employees on how you did. How likely are they to recommend HR to a friend or a colleague with a similar issue? Because I think that's really the only way we're going to turn the tide and make people feel more comfortable coming forward if they get that from their peers. But other trends that excite me, data, of course, is the most exciting thing. HR really needs to finally embrace data. If you think about marketing a decade or probably 2 decades ago, it was sort of fluffy, filled with jingles and logos, and they then embraced data. And marketing is all about data. And if you think about the power of marketing and what they do and the ability to, get funds and do exciting things in their organization, it's because of that data, the way they can be predictive in what they do. HR needs to get there. And so what our role is in that and what we're trying to do is give it in a way that's accessible. I'm an HR person turned tech leader, so a little bit of an anomaly. But as an HR professional, I wasn't great at pulling reports or, I didn't have an IT background to do an analysis. So we want to give that. We want to feed that to them and tell them what's going on through risk scoring, through different types of alerts, through stories that we feed up on their dashboards about what's going on in their organization. And I think when tech can happen that way, through AI, through natural language processing, that's what gets really excited. And there's so many opportunities right in HR for that.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today, Deb. I really appreciate it. But before I do let you go, could I ask that you remind everyone listening of where they can find HR Acuity online and also contact your team if they are left with any questions after listening to our conversation today?
Oh, absolutely. So you can find us at www.hrAcuity.com. We also are on LinkedIn. Go and follow our page. We have lots of content that we're always serving out, newsletters, articles that anybody can find helpful, whether you're a user of our platform or not. But if you want to get more information about HR Acuity, you can contact us at sales@hracuity.com.
Excellent. Well, honestly, I'm completely inspired by your story, Deb. And I hope it will inspire others listening all over the world too. And I kind of get the impression that you don't realise just how much you've achieved here, because with no tech background and just that desire to create a solution and having experienced so much clunky HR software to then create that solution, HR Acuity, that's now being used by companies such as Lyft, LinkedIn and so many others, it's just truly inspirational. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to come on and share that story with me today. So thanks, Deb.
It was great. Thanks, Neil, for having me. I enjoyed it.
Wow, what a story. And if you encounter a problem in your workplace or your industry, do me a favour. Don't complain about it in emails or Facebook statuses, and don't make excuses and say things like, I don't have the right tech skills, so what's the point? I want you to think about creating your own solution and make an impact and a difference, just like Deb did with HR Acuity. Now, I really enjoyed this one, and I'd love to hear from you. Anyone listening anywhere in the world that's got a similar story. Even if you've just identified the problem and just starting to think about a solution, or you're just at idea stage, I'd love to hear from you and support you in any way that I can. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, or pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. But with my first week back in the UK, I'm going to ease myself in gently and not burn myself out. So I'm going to go now, but I'll be back tomorrow with another guest and say thanks for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.